Did you know that Peter Griffin once spent over 20 minutes trying to remember if he locked his car, only to realize he doesn't actually own a car? Or that there's an episode where he becomes convinced his shadow is following him around? Welcome to the world of Family Guy, where the most bizarre situations somehow become comedy gold. I'm about to share some of the most mind-bending, sleep-inducing facts about this animated chaos that might just surprise you. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that Peter Griffin has died more times than any other main character on Family Guy? We're talking about legitimate deaths here, not just close calls or fake-outs. Throughout the series, Peter's been killed by everything from falling pianos to alien invasions. Yet somehow, he always manages to come back in the next scene, like nothing happened. The writers have never officially explained this phenomenon, leading to fan theories that range from Peter being immortal to the entire show taking place in some sort of cartoon purgatory. Here's another weird one that might help you drift off to sleep. Peter's weight has been officially listed as anywhere between 270 pounds to over 400 pounds, depending on which episode guide you're reading. But here's the kicker. In one episode, they actually show Peter stepping on a scale that reads -5 pounds. The joke was that he was so full of hot air that he defied the laws of physics. This kind of absurd humor is exactly what makes Family Guy so uniquely ridiculous. Speaking of Peter's physical characteristics, his age is another mystery that changes depending on who's writing the episode. He's been anywhere from 39 to 45 years old throughout the series, but in one memorable episode, they reveal that Peter doesn't actually know his own birthday. He's been celebrating it on the wrong day for years because he misread his birth certificate. When Lois finally corrects him, Peter insists on having a do-over birthday party, complete with all the presents he should have received on his actual birthday for the past decade. Now, here's something that might surprise you about the show's production. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't originally supposed to be recurring segments. The first fight scene was meant to be a one-off joke, but it tested so well with audiences that the writers decided to bring it back. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes and involve massive property damage across multiple city blocks, have become some of the most expensive animated sequences to produce on television. Each chicken fight costs more to animate than entire episodes of some other shows. Let me tell you about Peter's job situation, which is honestly more confusing than quantum physics. Throughout the series, he's worked at a toy factory, a brewery, his own fishing boat business, and even briefly as a bodyguard for a pop star. But here's the thing that'll keep you puzzling as you fall asleep. Sometimes within the same season, the show will contradict itself about where Peter works. In one episode, he'll be complaining about his boss at the brewery, and in the very next episode, he's somehow back at the toy factory with no explanation whatsoever. The Griffin family house itself is another source of endless continuity errors that hardcore fans love to debate. The layout of the house changes constantly throughout the series. Sometimes there are 4 bedrooms upstairs, sometimes 3. The basement has appeared on both the left and right sides of the house in different episodes. Most bizarrely, there was one episode where they showed a second staircase that had never existed before and has never been seen since. It's like the house exists in its own dimension, where architecture is more of a suggestion than a rule. Here's a fact that might make you chuckle as you're trying to fall asleep. Peter Griffin holds the record for the most words spoken per minute in any animated television series. During his fastest rapid-fire dialogue sequence, he spoke over 400 words in 60 seconds. The voice actor, Seth MacFarlane, had to practice that particular monologue for weeks to get it right. And even then, they had to record it in multiple takes and edit them together digitally. The show's relationship with censorship has always been interesting. But did you know that there are entire episodes that have been completely banned from certain countries? Not just edited or censored, but completely prohibited from airing. These episodes aren't necessarily the ones you'd expect either. Sometimes it's because of obscure cultural references that were considered offensive, or because of background details that viewers in certain regions found problematic. There's apparently a whole vault of Family Guy content that most of the world will never see. Peter's relationship with food deserves its own documentary series. Throughout the show, he's eaten everything from expired milk that was older than Meg to a sandwich so large it required a forklift to deliver. But the most impressive feat was when he ate an entire Thanksgiving dinner, including the table it was served on, in under 3 minutes. This wasn't even treated as particularly unusual by his family, who just went ahead and ordered pizza instead. The voice acting for Peter involves more physical comedy than you might expect. Seth MacFarlane actually acts out many of Peter's movements while recording his lines, which is why the character's gestures often seem so natural and expressive. During particularly energetic scenes, MacFarlane has been known to sweat through multiple shirts in a single recording session. He's also injured himself several times while getting too into character, including once throwing out his back during a particularly enthusiastic laugh sequence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's writing process. Many of Peter's most memorable one-liners were actually improvised during recording sessions. The writers would provide the basic structure of a scene, but they'd leave room for MacFarlane to add his own comedic touches. Some of these improvised moments became so popular with fans that they were later incorporated into the show's official mythology. The Griffin family car has been destroyed and mysteriously repaired more times than any other vehicle in television history. We're talking about complete destruction here. Blown up, crushed by giant robots, eaten by sea monsters, you name it. Yet somehow, it always appears good as new in the next scene. The car itself is supposed to be a mid-'80s sedan, but its exact make and model changes from episode to episode. Sometimes it's a Honda, sometimes it's a Ford, and occasionally it's a completely fictional brand that doesn't exist in real life. Peter's medical history reads like something out of a medical textbook written by someone who's never been to medical school. He's survived diseases that don't exist, undergone surgeries that are physically impossible, and been treated by doctors who clearly got their degrees from the back of a cereal box. In one episode, he's diagnosed with a condition where his bones are apparently made of rubber, which somehow makes him both incredibly flexible and completely indestructible. The show's approach to time and aging is fascinatingly inconsistent. While the Simpson family has remained the same age for decades, the Griffins seem to exist in a temporal bubble where sometimes years pass and sometimes they don't. Stewie has been a baby for over 20 years of real time. But there have been episodes where characters reference events from their past that would require them to have aged significantly. Here's a production detail that might interest you as you're winding down for the night. The animators have developed an entire catalog of Peter's facial expressions that numbers in the thousands. Each expression is carefully categorized by emotion, intensity, and context. There's apparently an expression called Peter confused by technology that gets used at least once per episode, and another one called Peter realizing he's made a terrible mistake. That's practically the show's trademark look. The Griffin family's financial situation is another source of endless mystery. Despite Peter's various job situations and questionable work ethic, the family somehow maintains a middle-class lifestyle in a decent neighborhood. They've been shown to be both desperately broke and surprisingly wealthy, sometimes within the same episode. Peter once claimed to have no money for groceries while simultaneously planning an expensive vacation to Europe. Peter's relationship with technology provides some of the show's most relatable comedy, especially for anyone who's ever struggled with modern gadgets. He's been defeated by everything from automatic doors to digital clocks. There was one memorable episode where he spent the entire runtime trying to figure out how to change the channel on a television remote, only to discover at the end that the TV wasn't even plugged in. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years, but Peter's character design has remained remarkably consistent. The animators have stated that his round shape and simple features make him one of the easier characters to draw, which is ironic considering how complex his personality has become over the years. His iconic green pants and white shirt combination was originally chosen because those colors were easy to reproduce consistently in animation. Here's something that might make you smile as you're drifting off. Peter Griffin has inadvertently solved more crimes than most actual detectives on television, not through any kind of investigative skill, mind you, but through sheer dumb luck and his tendency to stumble into situations where criminals just happen to confess everything to him. He's uncovered everything from art theft rings to international espionage operations, usually while just trying to buy a sandwich or find a bathroom. The character's impact on popular culture extends far beyond the show itself. Peter's laugh has been sampled in music tracks. His catchphrases have entered everyday vocabulary, and his image has appeared on everything from t-shirts to coffee mugs. There's even been academic papers written about his role as a representation of American masculinity in the 21st century, which is probably something Peter himself would find hilariously pretentious. Peter's driving skills, or complete lack thereof, deserve special mention. He's been responsible for more animated car accidents than any other cartoon character in history. The Department of Motor Vehicles in the show's universe has apparently given up on revoking his license, instead just accepting that Peter Griffin behind the wheel is simply a force of nature that must be endured. The show's writers have admitted that they sometimes write episodes specifically around Peter's most ridiculous character traits. There are entire plot lines that exist solely because someone in the writer's room wondered what would happen if Peter tried to do something completely ordinary, like go grocery shopping or attend a parent-teacher conference, and inevitably turned it into a disaster of epic proportions. As we wrap up this collection of Family Guy facts, here's one final detail that perfectly captures the show's absurdist spirit. In the show's internal logic, Peter Griffin is simultaneously the most incompetent person alive and somehow capable of surviving situations that would destroy normal human beings. He's a character who can't figure out how to use a can opener, but can somehow survive being hit by a train. He's confused by basic mathematics, but has accidentally invented several revolutionary technologies while trying to fix his toaster. These contradictions aren't bugs in the show's writing, they're features. Family Guy exists in a universe where logic is optional and consistency is overrated. Peter Griffin embodies this philosophy perfectly, being both completely relatable and utterly impossible at the same time. Whether that helps you fall asleep or keeps you awake wondering about the nature of animated reality is entirely up to you. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, even the most ridiculous facts somehow make perfect sense, which might be the most ridiculous fact of all. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're scrolling through YouTube at 3 in the morning looking for something to help you drift off to dreamland, you've stumbled upon the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes completely unhinged world of Family Guy with some truly wild facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you wide awake wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let's explore the wonderfully weird universe of Quahog, Rhode Island. Trust me, by the end of this journey through Family Guy's most fascinating secrets, you'll either be peacefully snoozing or have a whole new appreciation for just how crazy this show really gets. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox thought they were done with the Griffin family forever. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The ratings were so incredible that Fox literally had to eat humble pie and bring the show back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007, only to reverse that decision just months later. Talk about a roller coaster relationship between a network and a show. Speaking of relationships, let's talk about the voice behind our favorite talking baby, Stewie Griffin. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice Stewie, he also voices Brian, Peter, Glenn Quagmire, and several other characters. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane based Stewie's voice on the accent of English actor Rex Harrison, who you might know from the classic musical My Fair Lady. Yeah, that sophisticated, slightly pompous British accent that makes Stewie sound like an evil mastermind. It's straight from a Broadway legend. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he wanted Stewie to sound like an old-school English gentleman, which makes it even funnier when this supposedly refined character is plotting world domination from his crib. Now, if you think the show pushes boundaries on television, you should hear about some of the stuff that never made it to air. The writers and animators have created countless scenes, jokes, and entire storylines that were deemed too controversial even for Family Guy's standards. And considering what does make it onto television, that's really saying something. There's apparently an entire vault of unused content that could probably fill several seasons' worth of episodes. Some of these rejected bits have made their way onto DVD releases as deleted scenes, but many remain locked away forever, too wild even for the show known for having no limits. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Unlike many animated series that plan out entire seasons in advance, Family Guy often operates more like a live-action sitcom. The writers frequently come up with ideas on the spot, and episodes are sometimes completely rewritten just weeks before they're supposed to air. This spontaneous approach explains why the show can feel so fresh and unpredictable, but it also leads to some pretty intense crunch times for the animation team. Imagine trying to animate complex scenes with just days to spare before broadcast. Let's dive into some character secrets that most fans never realize. Brian the dog, everyone's favorite intellectual canine, was originally supposed to be just a regular pet. In the original concept, Brian was going to be a typical dog who couldn't talk and would just bark and fetch like any normal household pet. Seth MacFarlane decided to make him a talking character at the last minute, and thank goodness he did, because Brian's philosophical conversations and sarcastic wit have become some of the show's most memorable moments. It's wild to think that one of the most complex characters almost didn't have a voice at all. The show's animation style has some fascinating secrets too. Those seemingly simple character designs actually take an enormous amount of work to create. Each character has hundreds of different facial expressions and poses that animators can mix and match. Stewie alone has over 300 different mouth positions just for speaking different sounds. The animators have to keep track of all these variations to maintain consistency across episodes. It's like having a massive digital puppet show where every single movement has to be carefully orchestrated. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's music even more. Seth MacFarlane isn't just the creator, writer, and voice actor for multiple characters. He's also a legitimate recording artist who's released several albums of traditional pop standards. His musical background heavily influences the show, which is why you'll notice that Family Guy has more musical numbers than most animated comedies. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just thrown in for laughs. They're crafted by someone who genuinely understands musical theater and classic American songbook traditions. The show's cultural impact goes way beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has actually influenced real-world events and conversations. Politicians have referenced the show in speeches. Academics have written scholarly papers about its social commentary, and it's been credited with introducing younger audiences to cultural references they might never have encountered otherwise. Think about how many classic movies, TV shows, songs, and historical events you first learned about through a Family Guy cutaway gag. The show serves as this weird cultural bridge between different generations of entertainment. Now let's talk about some of the show's most controversial episodes and why they're so memorable. The writers have never shied away from tackling sensitive subjects, and sometimes their approach has sparked genuine debates about comedy, censorship, and social responsibility. Some episodes have been pulled from rotation, others have been edited for different markets, and a few have become legendary among fans, specifically because they push things too far. This willingness to court controversy has kept Family Guy relevant for over 2 decades, even as television landscape has changed dramatically around it. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unlike anything you'd expect. Seth MacFarlane often records multiple characters in the same session, essentially having conversations with himself. He'll record Peter's lines, then immediately switch to Brian's voice to respond, then jump to Stewie for the next exchange. Watching him work in the recording booth is apparently like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder having a very organized conversation with themselves. Other voice actors have said it's both impressive and slightly unsettling to watch. Here's something that connects to the show's longevity. Family Guy has aired over 400 episodes, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. To put that in perspective, if you watched every single episode back-to-back, you'd be sitting there for more than 150 hours straight. That's almost a full week of continuous Family Guy content. The show has literally created enough material to entertain someone for an entire week without sleeping, eating, or taking a single break. The show's international versions reveal some fascinating cultural differences. Family Guy is broadcast in dozens of countries, and each version has to navigate different censorship standards and cultural sensitivities. In some countries, entire jokes are replaced with completely different content. In others, characters' names are changed, and certain running gags are modified to make sense to local audiences. There are versions of Family Guy where the cultural references are so different that they're essentially completely different shows with the same characters. Let's explore some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans never hear about. Like any long-running show, Family Guy has had its share of creative disagreements, contract disputes, and personality conflicts. Seth MacFarlane has been very public about his occasional frustrations with the show, even stepping back from day-to-day involvement for several seasons. There have been disputes over storylines, character development, and the general direction of the show. Some former writers and voice actors have shared stories about heated arguments in writers' rooms and recording sessions that had to be stopped because of creative differences. The show's merchandising empire is absolutely massive. But some of the most interesting products never made it to market. There have been proposed Family Guy video games, theme park attractions, and even a planned Broadway musical that would have featured the Griffin family in live-action musical theater. The legal and logistical challenges of adapting animated characters for different mediums have killed dozens of potential projects over the years. Imagine walking through a Family Guy theme park, or watching actors in Peter and Lois costumes singing on Broadway. Here's a production secret that reveals how much work goes into each episode. A single 22-minute episode of Family Guy requires approximately 8 months to complete from initial concept to final broadcast. The process involves dozens of writers, voice actors, animators, sound engineers, and editors. Every single frame is reviewed multiple times. Every joke is analyzed and often rewritten. And every visual gag is carefully planned and executed. What looks like simple animation on screen represents thousands of hours of collaborative creative work. The show's relationship with censorship has created some legendary stories. There are episodes that exist in multiple versions, with different levels of content depending on when and where they're broadcast. The uncensored DVD versions of some episodes contain jokes and scenes that have never been seen on television. Meanwhile, daytime reruns are edited so heavily that some episodes are barely recognizable. The writers have learned to create content in layers, knowing that different versions will need different levels of editing for different audiences. Family Guy's influence on internet culture deserves its own discussion. The show has generated countless memes, viral videos, and online discussions. Certain episodes have become legendary specifically because of how they're shared and referenced online. The show's cutaway gag format translates perfectly to social media, where short, punchy jokes can be easily shared and remixed. Some Family Guy moments have become more famous as internet memes than they ever were as television content. The voice acting talent that has appeared on Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment. Celebrities often jump at the chance to appear on the show, sometimes playing themselves, sometimes voicing original characters. The guest star list includes everyone from major Hollywood actors to political figures to professional athletes. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others have appeared just once but created memorable moments that fans still talk about years later. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the seemingly random cutaway gags are actually carefully constructed references to specific movies, TV shows, or historical events. The writers spend considerable time researching these references to make sure they're accurate, even when they're being completely absurd. There are entire databases that catalog every cultural reference in every episode, and the depth of knowledge required to understand all the jokes is honestly staggering. The show's animation has evolved significantly over its run, but not always in ways you might expect. While the overall character designs have remained consistent, the background art, lighting effects, and scene composition have become much more sophisticated. Early episodes look almost primitive compared to recent ones, but the evolution has been so gradual that most viewers don't notice. Comparing the pilot episode to current episodes is like looking at completely different shows that happen to use the same characters. Family Guy's impact on other animated shows cannot be overstated. The success of Family Guy paved the way for countless other adult animated comedies, from American Dad to Rick and Morty to BoJack Horseman. The show proved that animated comedies could tackle adult themes and attract mature audiences, opening up an entire genre that barely existed before. Many current animators and writers cite Family Guy as a direct influence on their work and career choices. The show's approach to storytelling often breaks conventional narrative rules in fascinating ways. Episodes frequently abandon their main plots entirely for extended tangents. Characters regularly break the fourth wall to address the audience directly, and the show often parodies its own format and conventions. This meta approach to comedy requires a level of self-awareness that's rare in television, and it's part of what keeps longtime fans engaged, even after hundreds of episodes. As we wind down this journey through Family Guy's hidden world, it's worth reflecting on how a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island became such a cultural phenomenon. The show succeeds because it taps into something fundamentally human about finding humor in chaos, about laughing at things that probably shouldn't be funny, and about the strange comfort of familiar characters behaving in completely unpredictable ways. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or wide awake thinking about animated comedy theory, Family Guy continues to surprise, offend, entertain, and occasionally enlighten its audience after more than 20 years on the air. The show's ability to constantly reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity is perhaps the most impressive fact of all. Sweet dreams. And remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into trouble that's even weirder than anything we've discussed tonight. The chaos never really stops. And somehow, that's exactly what makes it so perfect for helping restless minds finally find peace. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the giant chicken nightmares bite. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice, and somehow clawed its way back from television death each time? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre world behind one of the most controversial animated shows ever created. And trust me, the stories I'm about to share will blow your mind. From secret celebrity cameos that never made it to air, to the shocking real-life inspiration behind Stewie's character, we're uncovering Family Guy secrets that even die-hard fans have never heard before. But first, let me paint you a picture of just how close we came to never having Family Guy at all. Back in 1999, when Seth MacFarlane pitched his idea to Fox executives, he was so broke he was literally sleeping on a friend's couch in Los Angeles. The pilot episode cost over $2 million to produce, making it one of the most expensive animated pilots in television history at that time. And here's the kicker. Fox almost passed on it completely because they thought it was too similar to The Simpsons. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, has a background that's absolutely fascinating and explains so much about the show's unique humor. He actually started working in animation when he was just 18 years old, creating a thesis film at the Rhode Island School of Design that would later become the blueprint for Family Guy. That student film, which you can still find online today, featured early versions of Peter, Lois, and their dog Brian, though they looked quite different from what we know now. What most people don't realize is that MacFarlane does the voices for 4 main characters on the show. He's not just Peter Griffin, but also Brian the dog, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. The interesting part is how he developed each voice. Peter's voice was inspired by a security guard MacFarlane knew who had a thick Rhode Island accent. Brian's voice is essentially MacFarlane's natural speaking voice, while Stewie was originally supposed to sound like Rex, Harrison from My Fair Lady, though it evolved into something completely different over time. Speaking of Stewie, here's something that might surprise you. The character was initially written as a one-dimensional villain baby who wanted to kill his mother and take over the world. MacFarlane has admitted in interviews that Stewie's sexuality was deliberately kept ambiguous for years, and the writers would often joke about it in the writer's room. The character's development into a more complex, often effeminate genius baby happened gradually over several seasons, and it wasn't planned from the beginning. The show's relationship with censorship has been absolutely wild from day one. There's an entire archive of Family Guy scenes that were deemed too controversial for broadcast television. One episode had a joke about the September 11th attacks that was removed before airing, and another had a sequence involving Mickey Mouse that Disney's lawyers shut down faster than you could say copyright infringement. The writers have always pushed boundaries, sometimes successfully, and sometimes not so much. Here's where things get really interesting. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox executives thought that was the end of it. But something unprecedented happened in television history. The show found a massive second life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim programming block. The DVD sales were so strong that they actually outsold many primetime dramas that were still on the air. This success story became a case study in how a show could resurrect itself through alternative distribution methods. The fan campaign to bring the show back was unlike anything television had seen before. This was before social media as we know it today, so fans organized through message boards, early blogs, and even physical petitions. They sent thousands of letters to Fox executives, and some fans even sent baby bottles and diapers as a reference to Stewie. The campaign worked, and in 2005, Family Guy returned for a 4th season, making it one of the first canceled shows to be revived due to fan demand and DVD sales. But then lightning struck twice, and the show was canceled again in 2002 and brought back again in 2005, making it the first show in television history to be canceled and revived twice. This second cancellation and revival story is even more dramatic than the first. The show's ratings had dipped during its 3rd season, and Fox executives felt it had run its course. However, the DVD sales for the first 3 seasons were so astronomical that they couldn't ignore the numbers. The voice acting process for Family Guy is absolutely fascinating and different from most animated shows. Unlike many animated series where actors record their lines separately, the main Family Guy cast often records together in the same room. This creates a more natural flow of dialogue and allows for improvisation that you can sometimes hear in the final episodes. Seth MacFarlane has said that some of the funniest moments in the show came from spontaneous interactions during these group recording sessions. One of the most mind-blowing facts about the show involves the famous chicken fight scenes between Peter Griffin and Ernie the giant chicken. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes, actually cost more to animate than entire episodes of some other animated shows. The animators have to create detailed fight choreography, multiple background locations, and complex character movements. MacFarlane has joked that these scenes are his way of burning through the show's animation budget in the most entertaining way possible. The show's cutaway gags, which are basically mini-sketches that interrupt the main storyline, weren't originally part of the show's format. They were added during the second season as a way to incorporate more jokes and references that didn't fit naturally into the main plot. These cutaways became so popular that they essentially became the show's signature style, influencing countless other animated comedies that followed. Family Guy has had some absolutely incredible celebrity guest stars over the years, but many people don't know about the ones who almost appeared but didn't. Michael Jackson was reportedly interested in doing a voice on the show in the early 2000s, but legal complications prevented it from happening. Similarly, several A-list actors have recorded guest appearances that were later cut from episodes due to various reasons, from scheduling conflicts to content concerns. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy references and memes have become part of everyday internet language. Phrases like, "that really grinds my gears," and "giggity" have entered the cultural lexicon. The show has been referenced in academic papers about humor, animation, and cultural commentary. Some universities have actually used Family Guy episodes as case studies in media studies courses. Here's something that might keep you up thinking about it. The show has predicted several real-world events with uncanny accuracy. There's an episode from 2005 that jokes about Kevin Spacey in a way that seems eerily prescient given later revelations about the actor. Another episode made jokes about certain political figures that seemed outlandish at the time but became remarkably relevant years later. Whether these are coincidences or the writers having incredible insight into human nature is up for debate. The international versions of Family Guy are absolutely wild and worth exploring if you're curious about cultural adaptation. The show has been dubbed into dozens of languages, and each version has had to navigate different cultural sensitivities and humor styles. The German version, for example, had to completely rewrite many jokes because direct translations didn't make sense or weren't funny in that cultural context. Some countries have banned certain episodes entirely while embracing others. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has been fascinating to watch evolve over the years. Initially, there was definitely some tension, with Simpsons creator Matt Groening making pointed comments about Family Guy being derivative. However, this led to one of the most brilliant crossover episodes in animated television history, where the two families actually met and interacted. The production of this crossover episode required unprecedented cooperation between two different animation studios and networks. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates differently from most television shows. The writers often compete to see who can come up with the most outrageous or offensive joke, with the understanding that most of these will never make it to air. This competitive atmosphere has created some of the show's most memorable moments, but it's also led to some jokes that had to be completely rewritten or abandoned during the production process. The show's approach to social and political commentary has evolved significantly over its run. Early episodes were primarily focused on absurd humor and pop culture references, but later seasons began incorporating more direct political satire and social commentary. This evolution has been both praised and criticized, with some fans preferring the original format and others appreciating the show's willingness to tackle serious topics through humor. MacFarlane's decision to step back from day-to-day involvement in the show after several seasons was a turning point that many fans noticed. His reduced involvement allowed other writers and producers to put their stamp on the show, leading to subtle but noticeable changes in humor, style, and character development. This transition period created some of the most experimental episodes in the show's history. The merchandising empire that Family Guy has built is absolutely staggering. From action figures to clothing lines, from video games to board games, the show has spawned an entire industry of products. Some of the most interesting merchandise includes items that reference the show's most obscure jokes, suggesting that the creators understand their audience's deep knowledge of the series. As we wind down our journey through these fascinating Family Guy facts, it's worth reflecting on how this show, that almost never existed, became such a cultural phenomenon. From sleeping on couches to creating a multi-million-dollar franchise, from cancellation to resurrection, from controversy to cultural impact, Family Guy represents something unique in entertainment history. The show continues to evolve and surprise audiences, and who knows what wild facts we'll be sharing about it in another 20 years. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere out there, Seth MacFarlane is probably working on another joke that will either make you laugh until you cry or shake your head in disbelief. Possibly both at the same time. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy episodes feel like fever dreams that somehow make perfect sense at 3 in the morning? Tonight, we're diving into the most bizarre, unexpected, and downright weird facts about this animated chaos machine that's been keeping us entertained and slightly disturbed for over 2 decades. From secret celebrity cameos you never noticed to production secrets that will change how you watch every episode, these facts are perfect for those late-night rabbit holes when your brain needs something wonderfully random to chew on. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young Seth MacFarlane is sitting in a cramped animation studio, probably surviving on nothing but coffee and pure creative madness, sketching out what would become one of television's most unpredictable shows. But here's something that might surprise you. Family Guy was actually rejected by multiple networks before Fox finally took a chance on it. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that Peter Griffin didn't even have his signature chin dimple. That's right, the most recognizable feature of television's most chaotic dad was an afterthought added later in development. Speaking of Peter Griffin's design, here's a fact that will blow your mind every time you see him on screen. Seth MacFarlane has admitted that Peter's appearance was directly inspired by a security guard he encountered at his college. This unnamed hero of late-night campus safety became the visual foundation for a character who would go on to terrorize animated television for decades. Imagine being that security guard and randomly discovering years later that you're the face of one of America's most beloved cartoon disasters. But the real magic happens when you start digging into the voice acting secrets. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice the main characters, he performs Stewie, Brian, Peter, and several recurring characters, often having entire conversations with himself during recording sessions. The studio engineers have described these solo recording sessions as watching someone have the world's most entertaining mental breakdown. MacFarlane literally argues with himself, switches between character voices mid-sentence, and somehow maintains the distinct personality of each character flawlessly. Here's where things get really interesting from a production standpoint. The show's writers have a tradition called the random joke jar, where they collect the most absurd, context-free gags throughout the season. When they're stuck on an episode or need to fill time, they literally reach into this jar and randomly select bizarre scenarios to animate. This explains why you'll be watching a normal family dinner scene that suddenly cuts to a 3-minute sequence about a time-traveling sandwich. It's not lazy writing. It's intentionally chaotic creativity with a system behind the madness. The cutaway gags that make Family Guy so distinctive weren't originally planned to be such a huge part of the show. In early episodes, they used these random flashbacks sparingly, but when they noticed these moments got the biggest laughs and the most social media attention, they leaned into the format completely. Now, these seemingly random interruptions are carefully crafted to hit specific comedic beats and often take longer to animate than the main storyline of entire episodes. One of the most mind-bending facts involves the show's relationship with celebrity guest stars. Many A-list celebrities have appeared on Family Guy without most viewers ever realizing it because their characters are so obscure or brief. Drew Barrymore once voiced a background character who had exactly 3 words of dialogue spread across 2 episodes. The producers love casting major stars in tiny roles as inside jokes for the industry, creating this weird Hollywood treasure hunt for eagle-eyed fans. The character of Stewie Griffin underwent one of television's most subtle character evolutions. In early seasons, Stewie was genuinely intended to be an evil genius baby-plotting world domination. But as the show progressed, the writers began exploring his character's vulnerability and intelligence in different ways. The transition was so gradual that most viewers didn't consciously notice when Stewie evolved from potential supervillain to the show's emotional center and Brian's best friend. This character development happened organically through hundreds of small writing decisions across multiple seasons. Here's something that will change how you watch every Brian and Stewie episode. Their relationship was originally supposed to remain antagonistic throughout the series. The writers planned for Brian to be constantly annoyed by Stewie's schemes and intellectual pretensions. However, the voice acting chemistry between Seth MacFarlane's two characters was so natural and compelling that the writers began crafting episodes specifically around their friendship. Some of the show's most acclaimed episodes, including the time travel and multiverse adventures, exist purely because the Brian-Stewie dynamic became too interesting to ignore. The animation process for Family Guy involves secrets that most fans never consider. Each episode requires approximately 4 months from initial script to final animation. But here's the weird part. They often animate scenes completely out of order, based on character availability and studio scheduling. This means the emotional arc of an episode might be animated backwards, with the climactic scenes completed weeks before the setup scenes. The animators have to maintain character continuity and emotional consistency without seeing the full episode in sequence until the very end of production. Musical numbers in Family Guy aren't just random comedic choices. They serve a specific psychological function in the show's pacing. The writers discovered that musical sequences reset viewer attention spans and create natural breaks in the chaotic energy that defines most episodes. When you feel overwhelmed by rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags, a musical number gives your brain permission to reset and re-engage with the storyline. It's basically psychological manipulation disguised as entertainment, and it works perfectly. The show's relationship with censorship creates some of the most interesting behind-the-scenes stories. Family Guy pushes boundaries so consistently that the network has entire meetings dedicated to determining what crosses the line versus what's cleverly subversive. The writers have become experts at crafting jokes that technically comply with broadcast standards while still managing to be completely inappropriate. They've turned censorship navigation into its own art form, often making the censored versions of jokes funnier than the original uncensored concepts. Here's a fact that demonstrates the show's cultural impact in ways you might not expect. Family Guy references have been spotted in congressional hearings, Supreme Court footnotes, and international diplomatic communications. Politicians and legal scholars apparently watch the show and unconsciously incorporate its humor patterns into serious discourse. There's something simultaneously hilarious and terrifying about the idea that Stewie Griffin's speech patterns are influencing actual government policy discussions. The economics behind Family Guy reveal fascinating insights into modern television production. Each episode costs significantly more to produce than most people realize because of the sheer amount of custom animation required for cutaway gags. A single random flashback sequence might require creating entirely new character designs, backgrounds, and animation styles that will never be used again. The show essentially produces mini-movies within every episode, making it one of the most expensive animated series on television, despite its seemingly simple art style. Voice recording sessions for Family Guy episodes are legendary among industry professionals for their complete unpredictability. Seth MacFarlane often improvises entire scenes in character, creating alternate versions of jokes that the writers never conceived. Sometimes these improvised moments are so funny that entire episode plots get rewritten around a single spontaneous line delivery. The recording booth becomes this weird laboratory where cartoon characters take on lives of their own and influence their own storylines. The show's treatment of controversial topics follows a specific comedy philosophy that Seth MacFarlane has described as equal opportunity offense. The writing team maintains detailed charts tracking which groups, topics, and themes they've targeted to ensure their irreverence remains balanced across the political and social spectrum. This systematic approach to controversy means every offensive joke is part of a larger pattern designed to prevent the show from developing any consistent political agenda beyond general chaos. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, was actually conceived as a way to explore Family Guy's universe from a completely different perspective while maintaining the same comedic DNA. The failed experiment taught the creators valuable lessons about what makes Family Guy specifically work versus what elements translate to other formats. Cleveland's return to Family Guy brought with him subtle character changes informed by his solo series experience, creating this weird continuity where a character evolved through his own failed show. The internet age has transformed how Family Guy episodes are created and consumed. The writers now monitor social media reactions to episodes in real time and adjust future storylines based on which jokes generate the most memes and viral moments. This feedback loop means the show is constantly evolving to match internet culture while simultaneously influencing internet culture. It's become this weird, symbiotic relationship where the show and its online fan base co-create content together. Animation errors in Family Guy often become intentional running gags when fans notice and celebrate them online. The production team has learned to embrace happy accidents, sometimes deliberately recreating animation mistakes in future episodes as callbacks to their own imperfections. This self-aware approach to production errors creates additional layers of humor for dedicated fans while maintaining accessibility for casual viewers. The show's influence on other animated series is more extensive than most people realize. Writing techniques, character development approaches, and comedic timing patterns pioneered by Family Guy appear throughout modern animated television. Shows that seem completely different often use Family Guy's structural innovations adapted to their own specific styles and audiences. It's become the secret template for contemporary animated comedy without most viewers consciously recognizing the influence. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are probably working on next season's episodes, crafting new combinations of chaos and creativity that will eventually become someone else's late-night viewing experience. Family Guy continues to exist in this weird space between sophisticated entertainment and absolute nonsense, providing the perfect mental soundtrack for those moments when your brain needs something familiar yet unpredictable to focus on while the rest of the world sleeps. The show's legacy isn't just about the jokes or the characters. It's about proving that television audiences are capable of appreciating complexity disguised as simplicity, intelligence hidden within apparent randomness, and genuine emotional moments embedded in absolute chaos. Sweet dreams, and may your unconscious mind sort through all this delightful weirdness while you rest. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and you stumble across something so unexpectedly fascinating that you forget you were even tired? Well, tonight we're diving deep into the chaotic, bizarre, and surprisingly complex world of Peter Griffin from Family Guy. And trust me, by the time we're done unraveling his entire story, you'll understand why this seemingly simple cartoon dad is actually one of television's most intricate characters. Most people think they know Peter Griffin. Fat guy, drinks beer, fights a giant chicken, right? Wrong. What if I told you that Peter's backstory involves multiple identities, time travel, alternate dimensions, and a family tree so twisted it makes soap operas look straightforward? What if I told you that this bumbling father figure has actually died and been resurrected more times than most comic book heroes? Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let me paint you the complete picture of Peter Griffin's existence, from his mysterious birth to his countless near-death experiences and everything in between. Because once you see the full scope of his story, Family Guy will never look the same again. Let's start at the very beginning, because Peter's origin story is far more complex than you might imagine. Peter Justin Griffin wasn't always a Griffin. He was born Peter McFinnigan in Mexico, though the circumstances of his birth are shrouded in mystery and contradiction. His biological father, Francis Griffin, was an ultra-religious Irish Catholic man whose stern demeanor would later shape much of Peter's rebellious adult personality. But here's where things get interesting. Peter spent his early childhood believing he was Irish, embracing this identity with the kind of enthusiasm only a child can muster. However, his world was turned upside down when he discovered through a series of revelations that his heritage was far more complicated than he ever imagined. The man he thought was his father figure, Francis, represented everything Peter would grow to rebel against: rigid religious doctrine, conservative values, and an inability to express joy or spontaneity. This early trauma of identity confusion would follow Peter throughout his entire life. Think about it. How many episodes revolve around Peter discovering something new about his past or his identity? It's not coincidence. It's the fundamental driving force of his character. He's constantly searching for who he really is, because his foundation was built on uncertainty. Peter's adoption by the Griffin family brought him to Rhode Island, specifically to the fictional town of Quahog. Now, Quahog itself is practically a character in Peter's story. This small New England town serves as both his sanctuary and his prison. It's where he's built his adult life, but it's also where he's trapped in cycles of behavior that prevent him from growing beyond his teenage mentality. The Griffin household on Spooner Street became Peter's universe, and understanding the dynamics of this home is crucial to understanding Peter himself. His relationship with his adoptive family shaped his approach to his own family later in life. The lack of a strong father figure during his formative years explains so much about his parenting style with his own children. Speaking of his children, let's talk about Peter as a father, because this is where his story becomes truly complex. Meg, Chris, and Stewie Griffin represent three different aspects of Peter's own personality reflected back at him. Meg embodies his insecurities and need for acceptance, which is why he treats her so harshly. He's rejecting the parts of himself he dislikes most. Chris represents his simple, well-meaning nature, which is why Peter can sometimes be genuinely caring toward him. And Stewie? Stewie represents Peter's intelligence and ambition, the parts of himself he never developed or explored. The way Peter interacts with each child tells us more about his internal psychology than any therapy session could. When he's cruel to Meg, he's being cruel to his own perceived inadequacies. When he's protective of Chris, he's protecting his own innocence. And when he's bewildered by Stewie, he's confronting the intellectual potential he never realized. Then there's Lois, and oh boy, is their relationship a masterclass in dysfunction disguised as sitcom comedy. Lois Peterschmidt Griffin comes from wealth and privilege, everything Peter never had growing up. Their marriage represents Peter's ultimate conquest. He managed to win over someone completely out of his league, but it also represents his greatest fear, that he's not worthy of love or success. Peter's constant need to prove himself worthy of Lois drives many of his most outrageous schemes and adventures. Every time he starts a business, learns a new skill, or attempts to become famous, he's really trying to prove that Lois was right to choose him. The fact that she stays with him despite his countless failures isn't just comedy gold, it's the foundation of Peter's entire worldview. Now let's talk about Peter's professional life, because his career history reads like a resume from an alternate dimension. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, tried his hand at entertainment, and held countless other jobs. Each career change represents Peter's ongoing search for his true calling, his desperate attempt to find something that gives his life meaning beyond just being a husband and father. The Pawtucket Patriot Brewery isn't just where Peter works, it's where he found his tribe. His friendship with Glenn Quagmire, Cleveland Brown, and Joe Swanson represents the family he chose for himself. These relationships are arguably the most stable and consistent in his entire life. While his family relationships are complicated by obligation and expectation, his friendships exist purely because he enjoys these people's company. But here's what's fascinating about Peter's friend group: they're all fundamentally broken in their own ways, just like him. Quagmire's hypersexuality, Cleveland's passive nature, and Joe's physical limitations all serve as mirrors for different aspects of Peter's own struggles with masculinity, ambition, and physical insecurity. The infamous chicken fights with Ernie the Giant Chicken deserve special attention because they represent something deeper than just absurd comedy. These epic battles symbolize Peter's relationship with obstacles in general. Instead of finding reasonable solutions to problems, Peter's instinct is to meet challenges head-on with disproportionate force and stubbornness. The chicken fights are metaphors for how Peter approaches every conflict in his life, with excessive energy, poor planning, and a refusal to back down even when he's clearly outmatched. Peter's death and resurrection experiences are another crucial element of his story that often gets overlooked. He's technically died multiple times throughout the series, only to return as if nothing happened. These deaths aren't just reset buttons for the show. They represent Peter's resilience and his refusal to let anything, including mortality, keep him down. Each resurrection reinforces his belief that he's somehow special, somehow protected, which feeds into his often reckless behavior. The alternate timeline and dimension episodes reveal even more about Peter's character. When we see versions of Peter from different realities, we're seeing the paths his life could have taken under different circumstances. Some versions are more successful, others are more tragic, but they're all recognizably Peter at their core. This suggests that regardless of circumstances, certain aspects of his personality are fundamental and unchangeable. Peter's relationship with authority figures throughout the series follows a consistent pattern that traces back to his complicated relationship with his biological father, Francis. Whether he's dealing with his boss, Mr. Weed, later Angela, or any government official, Peter's default response is rebellion. He can't help but challenge authority, not because he has a well-reasoned philosophical objection to hierarchy, but because authority reminds him of the rigid control he experienced in his early religious upbringing. His various business ventures and get-rich-quick schemes reveal Peter's deep-seated belief that success should come easily. This isn't just laziness. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how achievement works, likely stemming from his upbringing where religious doctrine promised rewards for faith rather than effort. Peter applies this same magical thinking to business, relationships, and personal growth. The running gags and catchphrases that define Peter aren't just comedy elements, they're coping mechanisms. His nigh-he-he-he laugh, his random pop culture references, and his tendency to break into song are all ways he deflects serious, emotional moments. Peter uses humor as a shield against having to confront the deeper issues in his life. Peter's body image and relationship with food tell another important part of his story. His weight isn't just a visual gag. It represents his relationship with comfort and self-control. Food is Peter's primary source of comfort, his go-to solution for stress, boredom, and emotional pain. His eating habits are directly tied to his emotional state, which is why dramatic moments in his life often involve food in some way. The flashback episodes that show Peter at different ages reveal how his core personality traits were established early and have remained remarkably consistent. Young Peter displays the same impulsiveness, the same need for attention, and the same difficulty with authority that define adult Peter. This consistency suggests that Peter's behavior isn't really about his circumstances. It's about deeply ingrained patterns of thinking and responding to the world. Peter's occasional moments of genuine wisdom and insight are perhaps the most revealing aspects of his character. When he drops his usual antics and speaks from the heart, we see glimpses of the person he could be if he wasn't so afraid of being vulnerable. These moments are rare, but they show that Peter's intelligence and emotional capacity are much greater than his usual behavior suggests. His relationship with popular culture and media consumption reflects modern society's relationship with information and entertainment. Peter absorbs pop culture references without really understanding their context or meaning, much like how many people today consume information. He's a character designed for the internet age, even though he was created before social media existed. The international episodes where Peter travels to different countries reveal his American-centric worldview, while also showing his capacity to adapt when forced out of his comfort zone. These adventures don't fundamentally change him, but they do show that he's capable of growth when his usual coping mechanisms aren't available. Peter's various nemeses throughout the series, from the chicken to his own father to random authority figures, all represent different aspects of his internal struggles. He's not really fighting these external enemies. He's fighting parts of himself that he can't accept or integrate. As we wrap up this deep dive into Peter Griffin's complete story, it's important to recognize that his character represents something universal about the human experience. We all struggle with identity. We all rebel against aspects of our upbringing. We all fear that we are not worthy of the love we've received, and we all use various coping mechanisms to avoid confronting our deepest insecurities. Peter Griffin isn't just a cartoon character. He's a mirror reflecting our own struggles with adulthood, responsibility, and self-acceptance. His story is ultimately about someone trying to figure out how to be a good person despite being fundamentally unprepared for adult life. And in that struggle, we see ourselves. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching random comedy sketches. You're witnessing the ongoing saga of a man wrestling with the same questions we all face. Who am I really? Am I good enough? And how do I build a meaningful life when I feel completely overwhelmed by the complexity of existence? Sweet dreams. And remember, we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along, just like Peter Griffin.
Have you ever wondered what happens when celebrities get roasted so hard by Family Guy that they actually fight back? Tonight, we're diving into the wild world of bruised egos, angry tweets, and even courtroom drama. Some of these reactions will shock you. Others might make you laugh, but all of them prove that not everyone can take a joke when Seth MacFarlane comes calling. Picture this. You're an Oscar-winning actor at the top of your game, and suddenly millions of people are watching an animated dog make fun of your nose. That's exactly what happened to Adrien Brody. And let me tell you, he did not find it amusing. During a murder mystery episode where characters are getting picked off one by one, Tom Tucker gets cornered by the other guests who think he's the killer. When they finally take him down, someone delivers this brutal line about casting Brody in a movie adaptation, basically saying nobody would want to watch it. But Family Guy wasn't finished with poor Adrien yet. They doubled down with another scene featuring Meg on a date watching a 3D movie. What's playing on screen? Adrien Brody doing shirtless sit-ups, and his famously prominent nose literally pokes out of the screen in full three-dimensional glory. It's the kind of visual gag that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. So, how did the Academy Award winner handle being the butt of these jokes? Not gracefully. According to Seth MacFarlane himself, in interviews, Seth revealed that when he approached Brody at a Hollywood party to smooth things over, mentioning how much he enjoyed one of Brody's films, the actor made it crystal clear that there were definitely hard feelings. No amount of compliments about his work could undo the sting of those animated jabs. This brings us to our next celebrity casualty, and this one gets really messy because it involves politics and personal family matters. Sarah Palin found herself in Family Guy's crosshairs during an episode where Chris goes on a date with a girl who has Down syndrome. During their dinner conversation, the girl casually mentions her family background, specifically that her mother used to be the governor of Alaska. Now, unless there's another former Alaskan governor out there with a child named Ellen, this was clearly aimed at Sarah Palin and her family situation. The timing made this particularly sensitive because Palin's son, who has Down syndrome, was only 2 years old at the time. The Palin family's reaction was swift and fierce. Sarah took to social media calling Family Guy a pathetic cartoon and labeling the creators heartless jerks. But she didn't stop there. She appeared on television talk shows, describing the writers as cruel and cold-hearted people who had crossed a line by making jokes about the disabled community. Family Guy fired back through Seth MacFarlane, who pointed out something interesting during his own television appearance. The character making those comments was actually voiced by Andrea Friedman, an actress who herself has Down syndrome. This actress later clarified that she felt the joke was directed at Sarah Palin personally, not at people with disabilities, and she even suggested that Palin simply didn't have a sense of humor about the situation. But sometimes Family Guy doesn't even need to directly target someone to cause controversy. Chloe Grace Moretz learned this the hard way when she became collateral damage in an internet phenomenon. During an episode where Peter decides to lose weight so he can ride a roller coaster, he sets his sights on looking as good as a character called Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin. This character was basically a visual gag. All legs with no torso. The joke itself had nothing to do with Moretz, but someone online photoshopped her picture to match this character design, and the image went viral across social media platforms. While the internet found it hilarious, Moretz definitely didn't. She publicly stated that this manipulated image seriously affected her body image and self-confidence, causing her to retreat from public appearances for a while. The cruel irony is that Family Guy never even mentioned her name, but she still got caught in the crossfire of internet culture. Speaking of crossing lines, Family Guy once ventured into territory so sensitive that it sparked outrage from disability advocates, religious groups, and grieving family members alike. They decided to create a school play episode featuring Terry Schiavo, the woman who became the center of one of America's most heartbreaking right-to-die legal battles. In typical Family Guy fashion, they turned this tragic real-life situation into a musical number performed by preschoolers. The kids sang cheerful songs with lyrics comparing Schiavo to an expensive plant that should just be unplugged. Even within the show, Brian questioned whether it was too soon for such material. But that didn't stop the episode from airing. The backlash was immediate and intense. Terry's own brother, Bobby Schindler Jr., was so furious about what he saw as insensitive treatment of his family's tragedy that he actually called for Fox to cancel Family Guy entirely. Religious groups and disability advocates joined the chorus of criticism, arguing that some subjects should be off-limits, even for satirical comedy. Now, getting roasted by Family Guy hits different when you're a comedian yourself. Rachel Bloom, creator and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, discovered this firsthand during an episode where Brian impulsively marries a woman with cancer. The storyline gets complicated when the woman's cancer goes into remission, leaving Brian stuck in a marriage he never really wanted. To make matters worse for Brian, his new wife gains weight, develops some unpleasant habits, and constantly gushes about her favorite television show. That's where Family Guy took their shot at Bloom's creation, having the character describe Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in dismissive terms, focusing on a musical number about menstruation, and suggesting that watching such shows makes someone unattractive and unlikable. Bloom's reaction was more nuanced than outright fury, but she definitely wasn't laughing. She pointed out that the scene reeked of male condescension, essentially equating appreciation for her show with being an undesirable woman. While she didn't launch a full-scale public campaign against Family Guy, her response made it clear that she felt the jab was rooted in sexist assumptions about female-created content. Sometimes, though, celebrities handle Family Guy roasts with unexpected maturity. Dax Shepard found himself on the receiving end of a quick but cutting intelligence joke during an episode where Brian discovers he has a brain tumor. When the family learns the tumor is benign and debates whether Brian should have surgery, someone quips about whether Dax Shepard turned out all right, clearly questioning his intelligence. Rather than ranting on social media or giving angry interviews, Shepard took a different approach. He brought up the joke directly with Seth MacFarlane during an appearance on his own podcast. He acknowledged that he understood the writers weren't trying to be malicious and recognized the nuanced nature of comedy, but he was honest about the fact that it still stung a little. This mature, direct conversation probably earned him more respect than any angry response could have. One of the most interesting cases involves James Woods, who went from being Family Guy's most willing participant to eventually walking away from the show entirely. For years, Woods not only tolerated being parodied but actively participated, voicing an exaggerated version of himself in multiple episodes. He played up his persona as a chaotic, scheming character who would steal identities, fake his own death, and constantly torment the Griffin family. Woods initially embraced the self-parody, even refusing payment because he genuinely enjoyed making fun of himself. This collaboration worked brilliantly for both parties, giving Family Guy a celebrity who was game for anything while allowing Woods to show his sense of humor. But by 2018, something changed. Woods became more politically vocal on social media, and when Family Guy offered him another episode, he turned it down. He tweeted that he felt the new material was too politically biased, and worse than being offensive, it simply wasn't funny anymore. He accused the show of becoming mean-spirited rather than genuinely comedic. After that public criticism, Woods disappeared from Family Guy entirely, marking the end of one of their most successful celebrity partnerships. The most extreme legal response came from Carol Burnett, who decided that if Family Guy was going to use her intellectual property, she was going to make them pay for it literally. The controversy stemmed from a brief scene where Quagmire visits an adult bookstore, and viewers catch a glimpse of Burnett's iconic charwoman character from her classic sketch show working as a janitor. The appearance lasted maybe 2 seconds and seemed relatively harmless by Family Guy standards, but Burnett saw it as a serious violation of her rights. She filed a lawsuit against Fox, claiming copyright infringement and misuse of her character without permission. She wasn't seeking a small settlement either. Reports indicated she wanted somewhere between $2 and $6 million in damages. The legal system didn't side with Burnett, however. Judge Dean Pregerson dismissed the case, ruling that Family Guy was protected under First Amendment parody provisions. Interestingly, though, the judge did note that while the show was legally protected, he found the scene distasteful and offensive to Burnett personally. So while she didn't win any money, she did get judicial acknowledgement that her feelings were valid. These reactions reveal something fascinating about celebrity culture and comedy boundaries. Some stars, like Dax Shepard and initially James Woods, showed they could laugh at themselves and engage constructively with satirical content. Others, like Adrian Brody and Sarah Palin, felt genuinely hurt and responded with public criticism. Still, others like Carol Burnett saw legal violations that needed addressing through the court system. What makes Family Guy's celebrity controversies particularly interesting is how they reflect broader conversations about comedy, free speech, and personal dignity in the digital age. When a show has millions of viewers and endless social media amplification, even a brief joke can follow someone around for years. The internet's ability to turn a 2-second gag into a viral meme, as happened with Chloe Grace Moretz, demonstrates how modern comedy can have unintended consequences. The show's approach to sensitive topics like disability, terminal illness, and personal tragedy also raises questions about whether any subject should be off-limits for satirical treatment. The Terry Schiavo episode particularly highlighted this tension, with critics arguing that some real-life situations are too painful and recent for comedic treatment, while others defend the right to satirize any public figure or event. From a psychological perspective, these celebrity reactions also reveal how public figures cope with being reduced to punchlines. Adrian Brody's continued resentment suggests that some people never fully recover from being mocked on such a large scale, especially when the jokes focus on physical characteristics they cannot change. Sarah Palin's fierce defense of her family shows how comedy can become deeply personal when it touches on sensitive family matters. The gender dynamics in some of these controversies are also worth examining. Rachel Bloom's observation about male condescension in comedy writing reflects broader conversations about how female creators and their work get treated in predominantly male-dominated comedy spaces. Her measured but critical response showed how women in entertainment often have to balance standing up for themselves while avoiding being labeled as humorless or overly sensitive. James Woods' evolution from enthusiastic participant to critic illustrates how political polarization can affect entertainment relationships. His willingness to mock himself disappeared when he felt the show's political perspective diverged too far from his own beliefs, suggesting that even self-deprecating humor has limits when it conflicts with personal values. The legal aspects, particularly Carol Burnett's lawsuit, highlight the complex intersection between parody rights and intellectual property protection. While courts generally protect satirical content under free speech provisions, celebrities still have legitimate concerns about how their likenesses and creations get used without permission, especially in commercial contexts. These stories also demonstrate the power dynamics between individual celebrities and large entertainment corporations. When Family Guy makes a joke, it has the backing of major networks and widespread distribution, while individual celebrities often have limited recourse beyond public statements or legal action. This imbalance can make satirical attacks feel particularly unfair to those being targeted. The internet's role in amplifying these controversies cannot be overlooked. Social media platforms allow both celebrities to respond directly to perceived slights and fans to create additional content that extends the original jokes in unexpected directions. Chloe Grace Moretz's experience shows how online communities can take a television gag and transform it into something more personally damaging than the original creators intended. Looking at the long-term impact of these controversies, it's clear that some celebrities never fully recover their relationship with Family Guy or its fan base. Adrian Brody's continued resentment years later suggests that animated mockery can create lasting professional and personal damage. Other celebrities like Dax Shepard seem to have moved on more successfully by addressing the situation directly and maturely. The varying reactions also reflect different approaches to celebrity image management in the digital age. Some stars try to ignore satirical attacks, hoping they'll fade away naturally. Others engage directly, either through humor or criticism. Still others pursue legal remedies when they feel their rights have been violated. None of these approaches seems universally successful, suggesting that there's no perfect way to handle being satirized by popular media. These celebrity feuds with Family Guy ultimately reveal the complex relationship between comedy, fame, and personal dignity in contemporary entertainment. While satirical shows claim the right to mock public figures, those figures retain the right to respond, criticize, and seek legal remedies when they feel boundaries have been crossed. The ongoing debates about these controversies suggest that society is still figuring out the appropriate balance between comedic freedom and personal respect. As entertainment becomes more personalized and social media makes everyone more accessible, these questions will likely become even more complicated. Whether you think these celebrities were justified in their reactions or believe they should have just laughed it off, one thing is clear. Family Guy's willingness to target anyone and everyone has created a fascinating collection of bruised egos and public feuds that continues to spark conversation about the limits and responsibilities of satirical comedy. Want to dive deeper into Family Guy controversies and see why so many people are calling for the show to be canceled entirely? Check out our next video exploring the growing backlash against the series and whether all this controversy is finally catching up with Seth MacFarlane's creation. What if I told you that behind the perfect housewife facade lies one of television's most twisted characters? The woman you think you know as the voice of reason in the Griffin household has actually murdered multiple people, cheated on her husband at least 12 times, and may have given birth to a child who isn't even his. This is the untold story of Lois Griffin, and trust me, it's darker than you ever imagined. Most people see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow tolerates Peter's antics while keeping their chaotic family together. But that's exactly what she wants you to think. The reality is that Lois Griffin has one of the most disturbing character arcs in animated television, filled with secrets that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. From her privileged upbringing to her descent into madness, every chapter of her life reveals new layers of dysfunction that will completely change how you see this seemingly innocent character. Let me take you back to where it all began. Lois wasn't always a Griffin. She was born Lois Pewterschmidt into one of the most powerful and dysfunctional families on the East Coast. Picture this: a sprawling mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where money flowed like water, but emotional warmth was as rare as honest politicians. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, built an empire on ruthless business practices, while her mother, Babs, played the role of the perfect trophy wife, both too busy with their own ambitions to give their children the love they desperately needed. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Lois had a brother named Patrick, and this family secret will haunt you. As a young child, Patrick witnessed something so traumatic involving his mother that it broke his mind completely. Carter's solution wasn't therapy or family healing. He had his own son shipped off to a mental institution and erased from family history like he never existed. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated, emotional brutality that would set the tone for how this family handled problems, make them disappear. Growing up in this environment, Lois and her sister Carol developed completely different survival mechanisms. Carol became desperate for male attention, rushing into relationship after relationship, collecting divorces like trophies. By the time we meet her, she's been married and divorced 8 times. Each failed relationship a symptom of the emotional void their parents created. But Lois chose a different path: rebellion disguised as conformity. As a teenager, Lois discovered a passion for modeling. For once, she had found something that made her feel alive, something that was hers. But when a legitimate modeling contract was offered, Carter crushed her dreams without hesitation. His exact words were chilling. His daughter would not lower herself to such work. This wasn't parental protection. This was control, masked as concern for social status. And this moment planted the first seeds of the resentment that would later explode into her adult dysfunction. College became Lois's escape hatch, but instead of finding freedom, she found chaos. At Kent State University, she threw herself into everything her controlling father had forbidden. She partied with reckless abandon, broke every rule she could find, and made choices that would haunt her for decades. The most shocking of these was starring in an adult film, not for money or fame, but as the ultimate act of rebellion against her family's pristine image. Think about the psychology here. This wasn't some wild phase or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a young woman so damaged by emotional neglect and control that she was willing to do anything to feel like she had agency over her own life. The fact that she shared this secret so casually with a reporter she barely knew tells us everything about her desperate need for authenticity in a life built on lies and appearances. But the real bombshell comes when we examine how she met Peter Griffin. Here's where the story becomes almost too bizarre to believe. Peter wasn't some college boyfriend or family friend. He was literally hired as a pool boy to clean her family's estate. Picture the scene. The refined daughter of a billionaire family falls for a man whose greatest talent is making fart jokes. On the surface, it looks like a classic opposites attract romance. But dig deeper, and you'll see the psychological warfare at play. Lois choosing Peter wasn't love at first sight. It was the nuclear option in her war against her father's expectations. Carter had controlled every aspect of her life, from her career choices to her social circle. So she chose the one person guaranteed to horrify him, a working-class man with zero social graces and fewer brain cells. This wasn't romance. This was revenge, with wedding vows. When Carter discovered their relationship, his reaction was swift and brutal. He had Peter knocked, unconscious and dumped in the middle of the ocean like some kind of mob hit. But Peter survived, and here's where things get interesting. Carter then offered Peter $1 million to walk away forever. Peter's response reveals something crucial about their dynamic. He turned down the money, claiming Lois was worth more to him than cash. But his exact words were telling. He said she was worthless to him, which is why he loved her. This wasn't the romantic declaration it appeared to be. This was two damaged people finding each other through mutual dysfunction. Peter saw in Lois someone who wouldn't judge his failures because she was running from her own. Lois saw in Peter the ultimate weapon against her family's suffocating expectations. Their love story wasn't built on compatibility or shared values. It was built on shared rebellion against the lives they were supposed to live. The cracks in this foundation became obvious almost immediately. When they tried to start fresh, after college, they broke up. Lois got engaged to Tom Tucker, a much more logical choice that her family approved of. But Peter couldn't let go, not because of love, but because losing Lois meant losing his identity as the rebel who stole the rich girl. So he crashed her wedding in a desperate last-ditch effort to reclaim what he saw as his greatest achievement. What happened next reveals the true toxicity of their relationship. Lois was already pregnant with Meg when they eloped, which means their entire marriage was built on necessity rather than choice. She literally couldn't back out even if she wanted to. This detail reframes their entire relationship. Every fight, every moment of dysfunction, every terrible decision can be traced back to this moment when two people trapped themselves in a marriage neither really wanted. Parenthood didn't fix their problems. It amplified them exponentially. Their first instinct as new parents was to abandon Meg at a fire station. When that failed, they took her home to Spooner Street, but the damage was already done. This child represented everything wrong with their relationship. Unplanned, unwanted, and a constant reminder of the life neither had chosen. As more children arrived, Lois's parenting style became increasingly unhinged. With Meg, she started as a protective mother, but gradually became cruel and dismissive. The most heartbreaking example is when Meg pours her heart out, telling Lois she loves her, and Lois can't bring herself to say it back. This isn't just poor parenting. This is emotional abandonment that mirrors her own childhood trauma. But Meg isn't the only victim of Lois's maternal dysfunction. She's physically abused Stewie, getting so desperate for pills that she dunked his head in a toilet to retrieve one that fell in. She ran over him with her car and immediately tried to cover it up, rather than face the consequences. These aren't accidents or momentary lapses. They're patterns of behavior that reveals someone completely detached from normal parental instincts. Even with Chris, supposedly her favorite, she's done things that cross every line of appropriate motherly behavior. When rumors spread that he was involved with an attractive teacher, instead of shutting down the inappropriate speculation, she confirmed it herself. This isn't protective parenting. This is a woman so desperate for attention that she'll exploit her own children to get it. The drug addiction storyline reveals just how far Lois has fallen from her privileged upbringing. This isn't recreational use or social experimentation. This is full-blown addiction that turns her into a criminal. She starts dealing drugs, becomes a kleptomaniac, and eventually graduates to violent crime. The woman who grew up in mansions is now poisoning baristas and kidnapping innocent people to maintain her position as the best customer at a coffee shop. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's character is her complete moral flexibility. She runs for mayor claiming to fight corruption, then immediately becomes as corrupt as the person she replaced. She allows oil companies to dump waste in the city's water supply for money. This isn't political compromise. This is selling out an entire community for personal gain. Her relationship with violence is equally troubling. She's admitted to killing multiple people, including a waitress on their honeymoon as part of some sick game with Peter. She traumatized Chris by revealing she'd killed someone with her car, then casually mentioned that all mothers have killed someone, as if murder was just another household chore. The pattern becomes clear when you look at her complete story. Every major decision in Lois's life has been driven by one of two motives: rebelling against her family's expectations, or covering up the consequences of previous rebellions. She chose Peter to spite her father. She had children because she was trapped. She became addicted to drugs to cope with her choices. She turned to crime to support her addictions. Each step led inevitably to the next in a downward spiral that shows no signs of stopping. Her infidelity adds another layer to this psychological profile. Lois hasn't just cheated on Peter occasionally. She's been systematically unfaithful throughout their entire marriage. She's had affairs with Bill Clinton, rock stars from the 80s, and even Peter's own half-brother. The most shocking revelation is her admission that Chris might not even be Peter's biological son, the result of an affair with actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. This isn't a woman struggling with temptation. This is someone who views marriage vows as suggestions rather than commitments. Her pattern of cheating reveals someone incapable of genuine intimacy, constantly seeking validation from new partners because she's never resolved the emotional damage from her childhood. The psychological implications become even more disturbing when you consider her relationships with Brian and Quagmire. Both men have been obsessed with her for years, and in alternate timelines, she's married both of them. This suggests that her appeal isn't based on genuine connection, but on some kind of emotional unavailability that draws damaged men to her like moths to a flame. Her bisexual tendencies, while potentially representing healthy sexual exploration, fit the same pattern. She kisses women impulsively, fantasizes about running away with female cashiers, and engages in passionate encounters with friends' wives. But these aren't expressions of genuine sexual identity. They're more rebellion, more ways to shock and transgress against social expectations. As Lois ages, the consequences of her choices begin catching up with her. By her 50th birthday, doctors are warning she might not survive much longer due to the physical toll of her lifestyle and the violence she's experienced. Stewie planted a time bomb in her uterus as an infant, and Chris nearly killed her during childbirth. These details aren't just dark humor. They're metaphors for how her own children have become weapons turned against her, the inevitable result of her toxic parenting. The future episodes show Lois and Peter still together in their retirement home. But this isn't a happy ending. It's two people too damaged and codependent to separate, even when they probably should. Their adult children push them into assisted living, suggesting that even as grown-ups, the Griffin kids can't wait to get their parents out of their lives. But here's what makes Lois truly fascinating as a character. She's not entirely unsympathetic. Every terrible thing she's done can be traced back to the emotional neglect and control she experienced as a child. Her father crushed her dreams and treated her like a possession. Her mother was absent and cold. Her brother was literally erased from family history when he became inconvenient. Is it any wonder she grew up incapable of healthy relationships or appropriate boundaries? The tragedy of Lois Griffin isn't that she became a terrible person. It's that she never had a real chance to become anything else. Every relationship in her life has been transactional or manipulative. She learned early that love comes with conditions and that people will abandon you if you become inconvenient. So she became someone who abandons others first, who cheats before being cheated on, who hurts before being hurt. Her criminal behavior isn't random chaos. It's the logical endpoint of a life spent learning that rules don't apply to people with money and power. Her father built an empire through ruthless business practices and made problems disappear through violence and money. Is it surprising that his daughter grew up thinking murder and corruption were just more extreme versions of normal problem solving? The drug addiction storyline reveals someone desperately trying to numb the pain of a life she never wanted. The cheating shows someone searching for connection she's never experienced. The violent outbursts demonstrate someone who learned early that force and manipulation get better results than honesty and vulnerability. Even her relationship with Peter, dysfunctional as it is, represents her attempt to break free from the toxic patterns of her childhood. She chose someone completely different from her father, someone who couldn't control or manipulate her through money or social pressure. The problem is that she chose someone equally damaged, someone whose emotional instability matched her own. The most disturbing aspect of Lois's story is how it reflects real-world patterns of generational trauma. Children who grow up in emotionally abusive environments often struggle to form healthy relationships as adults. They may seek out partners who replicate familiar patterns of dysfunction because chaos feels like home. They may become abusive parents themselves, not out of malice, but because they never learned healthy parenting models. Lois's story is a masterclass in how privilege can't protect children from emotional damage. All the money in the world couldn't give her what she really needed. Parents who loved her unconditionally and supported her dreams. Instead, she got parents who treated her like a business asset and a social accessory, valued only for how she reflected on their reputation. The brilliance of her character lies in how the show presents her as both victim and villain simultaneously. Yes, she's done terrible things that hurt innocent people. But understanding why she did them doesn't excuse the behavior. It explains how someone becomes capable of such actions. She's a cautionary tale about what happens when children don't receive the emotional foundation they need to become healthy adults. Her relationship with her own children reflects this cycle of dysfunction. She can't give them what she never received herself. Her inability to say "I love you" to Meg isn't just cruelty. It's the echo of parents who never said those words to her. Her physical abuse of Stewie mirrors the emotional violence she experienced growing up. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Lois's character is how normal she appears on the surface. She's articulate, intelligent, and socially skilled when she needs to be. She can play the role of the concerned mother, the devoted wife, the responsible citizen. This ability to present a functional facade while being completely broken inside makes her more dangerous than someone whose dysfunction is obvious. The show's genius lies in slowly revealing the depths of her damage over time. Early episodes presented her as the reasonable one, the moral center of the family. But as the series progressed, each new revelation stripped away another layer of that facade until we saw the broken person underneath. This isn't character assassination. It's archaeological excavation, uncovering the psychological damage that was always there but carefully hidden. Looking at Lois Griffin's complete story, we see a masterpiece of character development that illustrates how childhood trauma can echo through generations. She's not just a cartoon character making bad choices for laughs. She's a complex psychological portrait of someone whose entire life has been shaped by early emotional wounds that never healed. Her story serves as a dark mirror to the American dream, showing how wealth and privilege can create their own forms of destruction. The Pewterschmidt family had everything money could buy, but nothing that actually mattered. And their daughter grew up to become living proof that you can't buy emotional health or authentic human connection. The most disturbing realization about Lois Griffin is that she's not an anomaly. She's a recognizable type. We all know people who seem to have everything together on the surface, but whose personal lives are complete disasters. We see them in positions of power, making decisions that affect others while being completely incapable of managing their own emotional lives. Lois Griffin's entire story is a cautionary tale about the price of emotional neglect and the generational transmission of trauma. She started as a victim of her parents' dysfunction and became the architect of her children's future therapy bills. Her legacy isn't the crimes she's committed or the people she's hurt. It's the cycle of damage that will likely continue through her own children unless they find ways to break free from the patterns she's established. In the end, Lois Griffin represents one of television's most complex and disturbing character studies. She's simultaneously the victim of generational trauma and the perpetrator of new trauma, a woman whose entire life has been shaped by her unsuccessful attempts to escape the emotional prison her parents built around her childhood. Understanding her story doesn't excuse her actions, but it does explain how someone becomes capable of such systematic dysfunction while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. The brilliance of her character lies not in the shocking things she does, but in how those actions reflect deeper patterns of psychological damage that make perfect sense once you understand where she came from. She's not crazy. She's the logical product of her environment, which makes her story both more tragic and more terrifying than any random acts of villainy could ever be. Ready to drift into the wonderfully chaotic world of Quahog? Tonight, we're diving deep into the most bizarre, hilarious, and oddly comforting Family Guy facts that'll have you sleeping soundly while laughing internally. From the Griffin family's darkest secrets to the most obscure trivia that even die-hard fans might miss, this is your ultimate bedtime companion for all things Family Guy. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Peter Griffin wasn't always meant to be the bumbling patriarch we know and love. The original concept had him as a more competent character, but as the show evolved, his stupidity became his defining trait. What's fascinating is how this intellectual decline actually mirrors real-world studies showing that prolonged exposure to certain environments can affect cognitive function. Peter's workplace at the brewery, his constant drinking, and his circle of equally dim friends created the perfect storm for his legendary ignorance. Speaking of Peter's proud intelligence, did you know his IQ has been tested multiple times throughout the series? While never explicitly stated, various episodes hint that it hovers somewhere between a goldfish and a particularly slow houseplant. The writers deliberately keep it vague because, as creator Seth MacFarlane once mentioned in interviews, giving Peter a specific IQ would limit the comedic possibilities. Sometimes he needs to be smart enough to operate heavy machinery. Other times he can't figure out how doorknobs work. The Griffin house itself holds secrets that most viewers never notice. The layout has mysteriously changed dozens of times throughout the series, with rooms appearing and disappearing like they're part of some supernatural phenomenon. The basement alone has been everything from a simple storage space to an elaborate laboratory, a nightclub, and even home to Peter's secret basement family. This isn't just inconsistent animation, it's actually become a running gag among the production team, who deliberately shift the house's internal geography to mess with detail-oriented fans. Here's something that'll make you appreciate Stewie even more. His distinctive British accent wasn't originally planned. Seth MacFarlane was experimenting with different voices during early development, and the posh British accent was meant to be temporary. However, when they recorded the first few episodes, the contrast between this sophisticated voice coming from a baby was so hilarious that they kept it. The accent also serves a deeper purpose, representing Stewie's intellectual superiority over his family, while simultaneously making his evil plots seem more theatrical than genuinely threatening. Brian Griffin represents one of television's most complex characters when you really think about it. He's an atheist in a predominantly Christian household, a failed writer in a family that doesn't value intellectual pursuits, and an alcoholic struggling with depression while maintaining a facade of being the voice of reason. The writers have used Brian to explore serious topics like addiction, mental health, and existential crisis, all while keeping the show fundamentally comedic. His relationship with Stewie works so well because they're both outsiders in their own family, bonded by their shared sense of not quite belonging. The show's animation style has evolved dramatically since its debut, but one thing that's remained consistent is the deliberate simplicity of character designs. This wasn't just a budget consideration. It was an artistic choice that allows for more fluid animation during the show's famous action sequences. Those epic Peter versus giant chicken fights require characters that can be drawn quickly and consistently by multiple animators, which is why everyone has such distinctive, simple silhouettes. Cleveland's departure and return to the show created one of the most interesting character arcs in animated television. When he left for his own spin-off, the writers had to figure out how to maintain the dynamic of Peter's friend group. Joe and Quagmire's personalities were subtly adjusted to fill the void Cleveland left behind. When Cleveland returned after his show was canceled, he was noticeably different, more cynical, and world-weary, reflecting both the character's experiences and perhaps the writer's own feelings about the failed spin-off. The show's time travel episodes aren't just random comedy. They're actually carefully constructed to avoid major paradoxes while still allowing for maximum chaos. Stewie's time machine has specific rules that the writers follow consistently, even when it's not explicitly stated. Time travelers can't prevent their own birth. Major historical events have a way of correcting themselves, and actions in the past create ripple effects rather than complete timeline rewrites. This attention to detail in such a seemingly chaotic show demonstrates the sophisticated writing behind the surface-level humor. Meg's treatment by her family has sparked countless discussions about bullying and family dynamics. What's interesting is that the writers have admitted they sometimes feel guilty about how harshly Meg is treated, leading to occasional episodes where she gets small victories or moments of genuine family connection. These episodes often perform better with audiences, suggesting that viewers appreciate depth even in characters who primarily exist for comic relief. The show's use of cutaway gags serves a purpose beyond just random humor. These flashbacks and fantasy sequences allow the writers to explore scenarios that would be impossible within the show's normal continuity. They're also used strategically to control pacing, breaking up dialogue-heavy scenes or extending episodes that might otherwise run short. Some of the most memorable Family Guy moments come from these seemingly throwaway gags, proving that sometimes the best comedy comes from complete non sequiturs. Lois Griffin's character represents an interesting study in maternal archetypes. She's simultaneously the long-suffering wife, the voice of reason, and occasionally the instigator of chaos. Her wealthy background provides constant opportunities for class-based humor, while her decision to marry Peter creates natural conflict with her family. The writers have explored her character depth through various episodes, showing her capacity for both nurturing and destruction, making her far more complex than the typical animated housewife. The show's musical numbers aren't just entertainment. They serve specific narrative functions. Songs are used to advance plot, develop character relationships, and provide emotional beats that straight dialogue might not achieve. The production team includes talented musicians who ensure these sequences feel authentic rather than forced. Some episodes are structured entirely around musical numbers, creating mini operettas within the traditional sitcom format. Family Guy's relationship with censorship has created some of the show's most creative moments. When standards and practices reject certain content, the writers often find more clever ways to address the same topics. This has led to some surprisingly sophisticated social commentary disguised as silly cartoon humor. The show's late-night time slot allows for more adult content, but the writers still push boundaries in ways that require careful navigation of network policies. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unique in animation. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, often having conversations with himself that require precise timing and distinct vocal characterizations. Recording sessions involve complex choreography as he switches between Peter, Brian, and Stewie, sometimes within single scenes. Other voice actors have adapted to this rhythm, creating an ensemble performance style that's rare in animation. The show's treatment of death and resurrection has become increasingly casual over the years. Characters have died and returned so often that mortality has lost much of its dramatic weight. This reflects both the show's cartoon logic and its approach to consequences. Actions that would be traumatic in real life become temporary inconveniences in the Family Guy universe, allowing for more extreme comedy without lasting emotional impact. Product placement and corporate references in Family Guy often serve dual purposes. While they sometimes represent genuine sponsorship deals, they're more often used for satirical commentary on consumer culture. The show frequently mocks the very brands it features, creating a complex relationship between commercial interests and creative expression. This balancing act reflects broader tensions in modern television production. The show's international versions reveal interesting cultural adaptations. Different countries handle the humor differently, sometimes replacing American-specific references with local equivalents. These translations offer insight into how comedy translates across cultural boundaries and what elements of Family Guy appeal to global audiences versus American-specific humor. Background characters in Family Guy often have surprisingly detailed backstories that never make it into episodes. The writers develop full histories for even minor characters, creating a rich fictional universe that extends beyond what viewers see. This attention to detail helps maintain consistency and provides material for potential future storylines, even if most of this information never becomes canonical. The show's handling of controversial topics has evolved significantly since its early seasons. What began as relatively straightforward shock humor has developed into more nuanced social commentary, though it still maintains its irreverent tone. The writers have learned to balance pushing boundaries with responsible storytelling, creating content that generates discussion rather than just controversy. Seth MacFarlane's musical background significantly influences the show's comedy style. His training in musical theater brings a sense of timing and rhythm to dialogue that's unusual in animated comedy. This musical sensibility affects everything from joke delivery to episode pacing, creating a unique comedic rhythm that distinguishes Family Guy from other animated series. The show's science fiction elements, particularly Stewie's inventions, follow surprisingly consistent internal logic. Time machines, mind control devices, and other fantastic technologies operate according to established rules within the show's universe. This consistency allows for complex storylines that span multiple episodes while maintaining the suspension of disbelief necessary for science fiction comedy. Family Guy's influence on internet culture extends far beyond simple memes. The show's rapid-fire reference style and cutaway structure mirror how information is consumed online, creating a feedback loop between the show and digital culture. Clips and quotes circulate independently of full episodes, creating new contexts and meanings for the show's content. The production schedule for Family Guy requires incredible coordination between writers, animators, voice actors, and musicians. Each episode involves hundreds of people working across multiple disciplines and locations. The complexity of this process is invisible to viewers, but represents a significant logistical achievement that enables the show's consistent quality and unique style. Character relationship dynamics in Family Guy follow specific patterns that create comedy through repetition and variation. Peter and Chicken's fights, Brian and Stewie's adventures, and Meg's rejection by her family operate like musical themes, with each iteration building on previous versions while introducing new elements. This structural approach to character interaction creates familiarity while maintaining surprise. The show's approach to aging is particularly interesting in animation. Characters remain physically the same while their experiences accumulate, creating personalities that develop without visual change. This allows for long-term character growth while maintaining the visual consistency that animation requires. The writers must balance character development with the static nature of animated characters. Family Guy's educational content is often hidden within comedy. Historical references, scientific concepts, and cultural knowledge are embedded in jokes and storylines, creating opportunities for learning disguised as entertainment. Viewers often gain information about topics they might not otherwise encounter, making the show inadvertently educational despite its primary focus on humor. The show's production team includes specialists in various fields who ensure accuracy in specialized content, medical procedures, legal situations, and technical details are researched to maintain believability even within the show's exaggerated reality. This attention to detail supports the show's ability to tackle complex topics while maintaining its comedic tone. Sound design in Family Guy extends beyond dialogue and music to create a rich auditory landscape. Background sounds, sound effects, and ambient noise contribute to the show's atmosphere and comedic timing. The production team uses audio to enhance visual gags and create emotional responses that support the storytelling. The show's merchandising strategy reflects its cultural impact and commercial success. Products range from simple apparel to complex collectibles, creating multiple revenue streams that support continued production. The variety of merchandise also demonstrates the show's broad appeal across different demographic groups and age ranges. Family Guy's influence on other animated shows is evident in the proliferation of adult-oriented animated comedy. The show's success paved the way for numerous imitators and inspired shows that push boundaries in different directions. This influence extends beyond animation to live-action comedy, creating a lasting impact on television humor. As we drift toward sleep, remember that Family Guy represents more than just animated comedy. It's a cultural phenomenon that reflects our society's humor, values, and contradictions. The Griffin family's chaos mirrors our own family dynamics. Their struggles echo our personal challenges, and their resilience reminds us that laughter can overcome almost anything. Whether you're dreaming of time travel adventures with Stewie, epic battles between Peter and a giant chicken, or simply the comfort of familiar voices telling familiar jokes, Family Guy continues to provide entertainment that's both sophisticated and silly, meaningful and meaningless, just like life itself. Sweet dreams. And remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into another ridiculous situation that'll make you laugh tomorrow. What if I told you that one cartoon dad has a higher body count than most movie villains? Today we're diving deep into the chaotic world of Peter Griffin and counting every single person this animated maniac has eliminated. Trust me, the numbers are absolutely insane. Most people think Peter Griffin is just a lovable goofball who makes stupid mistakes. But when you actually sit down and track his actions across hundreds of Family Guy episodes, a terrifying pattern emerges. This isn't just some clumsy dad bumbling through life. This is a walking disaster zone who leaves destruction wherever he goes. I spent weeks combing through every Family Guy episode, taking notes, rewinding scenes, and meticulously documenting each incident. What I discovered shocked me. Peter Griffin isn't just accidentally dangerous. He's legitimately one of the most prolific killers in television history. And the worst part? He never faces any real consequences. Let's start from the very beginning with Peter's first confirmed elimination. In only the second episode of the entire series, Peter runs down the Roadrunner from Looney Tunes while driving, just flattens the poor bird completely. When asked if he hit something, Peter casually dismisses it and keeps driving. That casual attitude toward taking a life, it sets the tone for everything that follows. The very next episode, things escalate dramatically. A tour bus pulls up to the Griffin house, and Peter completely loses his mind. He grabs a shotgun and opens fire on the entire vehicle. 3 people eliminated just like that. His reaction to seeing strangers at his door was immediate violence. No questions asked. No attempt at communication. Just grab a weapon and start shooting. Then there's the hospital incident that really showcases Peter's dangerous incompetence. Somehow this man was allowed to work as a doctor, which should have been a red flag for everyone involved. During what appears to be a routine procedure, Peter's negligence directly leads to a patient's death. The fact that he was even permitted near medical equipment shows a serious breakdown in the system. But Peter's killing spree really picks up steam when he temporarily takes over Death's job. With supernatural powers at his disposal, Peter becomes exponentially more dangerous. He kills 2 airline pilots mid-flight simply by touching them. Thousands of passengers could have died if not for quick thinking from another character who managed to land the plane. Peter's reaction to nearly causing a massive aviation disaster? He jokes about needing mittens. The pattern becomes clear early on. Peter has zero regard for human life and even less understanding of consequences. When tasked with simple babysitting duties, he leaves an infant to drown in a bathtub. His parenting instincts are so fundamentally broken that he can't even keep a baby alive for one evening. Speaking of children, Peter's relationship with kids is consistently disturbing. When he briefly works as a nanny dressed up like Mary Poppins, 2 children end up dead and hidden under a bed. These weren't accidents or misunderstandings. Peter's presence in any childcare situation inevitably leads to tragedy. But the really chilling moments come when Peter turns his violence toward his own family. In one episode, his negligence with home repairs leads to carbon monoxide poisoning that kills Lois, Chris, and Meg. Even though they're miraculously fine in the next episode, Peter's actions directly cause their deaths. A husband and father who accidentally kills his entire family should be traumatized for life. Peter just moves on like nothing happened. The mob-style execution of Brian over some leftover food shows Peter's capacity for cold-blooded murder. When his dog eats his chicken and drinks his cream soda, Peter responds with gangster-level violence. The casual way he eliminates a family member over such trivial matters reveals the true depth of his sociopathic tendencies. Peter's parenting philosophy seems to involve extreme violence as conflict resolution. When his daughter faces bullying at school, instead of speaking to teachers or parents, Peter takes matters into his own hands. The bully doesn't survive the encounter. Later, when presenting what he thinks is the bully's head to his son, Peter admits he got the wrong kid entirely. He murdered an innocent deaf child by mistake and shows no remorse whatsoever. The axe murder of Cleveland represents a turning point where Peter's violence becomes increasingly graphic and disturbing. This isn't cartoon slapstick anymore. This is genuine horror movie material. The casual way Peter wields deadly weapons against friends and neighbors shows a complete break from reality and basic human decency. From this point forward, Peter's methods become increasingly brutal, and his body count starts climbing exponentially. The chainsaw massacres alone account for dozens of victims. Peter goes from house to house like a serial killer, methodically eliminating anyone in his path. The fact that he seems to enjoy this level of violence makes it even more disturbing. One of the most senseless killings involves Peter murdering a child just to steal a jet ski. When his family points out they're literally standing next to their boat, Peter ignores them and commits homicide anyway. This isn't about necessity or even twisted logic. This is pure evil masked as comedy. The restaurant incident where Peter kills a woman named Erica while trying to prove his cooking skills demonstrates how his ego and incompetence create deadly combinations. Peter's need to show off constantly puts innocent people in mortal danger. Peter's involvement in sports inevitably leads to casualties. Every athletic activity he participates in somehow results in someone's death. Whether it's shot put, treasure hunting, or any other recreational activity, Peter transforms harmless fun into lethal encounters. The drunk driving incidents reveal another layer of Peter's criminal behavior. He openly admits to calculating exactly how much alcohol he can consume while still being able to drive. This premeditated approach to endangering others shows Peter knows his actions are dangerous, but simply doesn't care about the consequences. The Boston Marathon Massacre stands out as one of Peter's most heinous acts. Running down dozens of innocent runners during a major sporting event crosses the line from accidental violence into mass murder territory. The casualty count from this single incident rivals actual terrorist attacks. Peter's racism leads to deadly encounters as well. His casual bigotry creates situations where innocent people lose their lives simply for existing in Peter's presence. The anthropology store incident perfectly captures how Peter's prejudices fuel his violent tendencies. When Peter briefly becomes death incarnate, his kill count skyrockets through supernatural means. Having the literal power of life and death in Peter's hands is like giving a nuclear weapon to a toddler. The pilots who die simply from Peter's touch represent just the beginning of the carnage. The hospital bombings showcase Peter's evolution into full-scale terrorism. Destroying entire medical facilities because he disagrees with vaccines makes Peter an anti-science extremist willing to commit mass murder for his beliefs. The estimated casualty counts from these attacks reach into the hundreds. Peter's accidental involvement with actual terrorists leads to multiple explosive incidents. His friendship with a terrorist operative results in several bombings throughout the city. Even when Peter tries to do the right thing by helping authorities, he ends up triggering more explosions that kill dozens of innocent people. The secret society incident demonstrates Peter's capacity for large-scale destruction. Burning down an entire facility housing historical documents leads to hundreds of deaths. Peter's inability to consider consequences means every action he takes has the potential for massive collateral damage. The presidential fight with Donald Trump represents the peak of Peter's destructive potential. Their brawl triggers nuclear missile launches that devastate multiple population centers. The casualty count from this single incident reaches into the thousands. Peter literally causes acts of war through his inability to control his temper. But none of Peter's individual acts of violence compare to his ongoing feud with Ernie the Giant Chicken. This running conflict has resulted in more deaths and destruction than actual wars. Every encounter between these two characters leaves dozens of innocent bystanders dead. Their first major battle destroys multiple vehicles, causes plane crashes, and brings down entire buildings. The Ferry wheel incident alone accounts for hundreds of casualties as the massive structure rolls through populated areas. Their fights aren't contained conflicts between two individuals. They're citywide disasters that claim enormous numbers of innocent lives. The cruise ship battle represents the most destructive single incident in their ongoing war. When their fight moves into the engine room, they lose control of a massive passenger vessel that crashes into a major city. The resulting destruction levels multiple city blocks and kills hundreds of people. This single incident qualifies as one of the worst maritime disasters in history. Their time travel battle creates paradoxes that threaten the fabric of reality itself. When Peter and Ernie use time manipulation technology to continue their fight across multiple historical periods, they create cascading effects that alter the course of human history. The scientist who created the time machine becomes an early casualty of their temporal warfare. The NASA facility destruction shows how their conflict has escalated beyond Earth itself. Their space battle crashes back to the planet and destroys an ocean oil rig, adding environmental disaster to their already impressive list of crimes against humanity. The reverse time sequence battle creates some of the most confusing and deadly encounters in their entire conflict. When everything starts happening backwards, the destruction becomes even more widespread and incomprehensible. Plane crashes, building collapses, and mass casualties all blend together in a chaotic symphony of violence. When you calculate the total casualties from just the Peter versus Ernie conflicts, the number reaches nearly 1,500 deaths. This means half of Peter's entire body count comes from a single ongoing dispute that started over an expired coupon. The fact that such trivial origins led to such massive destruction perfectly encapsulates Peter's character. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcases Peter's ability to bring his destructive tendencies to other fictional universes. His fight with Homer Simpson levels significant portions of Springfield and adds another 100 casualties to his count. Even when visiting other shows, Peter cannot help but create mayhem and death. Throughout all of these incidents, certain patterns emerge that make Peter's behavior even more disturbing. He shows no remorse for any of his actions. He never learns from his mistakes or attempts to modify his behavior. Most importantly, he faces no meaningful consequences for any of his crimes. The legal system in Peter's universe seems completely incapable of holding him accountable. Despite committing mass murder on multiple occasions, Peter continues to walk free and repeat his destructive patterns. This creates a world where violence has no consequences and human life has no value. Peter's family and friends enable his behavior by treating his mass murder sprees as minor inconveniences rather than serious crimes. When someone consistently kills innocent people, the appropriate response is not to laugh it off and wait for the next episode. The normalization of Peter's violence makes everyone around him complicit in his crimes. The media within Peter's world also fails to adequately report on his actions. Despite causing multiple disasters that should dominate news cycles for months, Peter's crimes are quickly forgotten and life returns to normal. This unrealistic portrayal of consequences sends dangerous messages about accountability and justice. When you add up every death directly attributable to Peter Griffin's actions, the final count reaches approximately 2,800 people. This makes him one of the most prolific killers in entertainment history. For context, this body count exceeds many actual historical mass murderers and rivals casualty figures from major military conflicts. The fact that this level of violence is presented as comedy raises serious questions about desensitization to violence in media. When mass murder becomes a punchline, society loses important moral boundaries that separate acceptable behavior from criminal acts. Peter Griffin represents the logical extreme of consequence-free violence in entertainment. His character demonstrates what happens when someone with destructive tendencies faces no accountability for their actions. The result is escalating violence that eventually reaches genocidal proportions. The most disturbing aspect of Peter's character is how his violence is often portrayed as justified or at least understandable. Whether defending his family, pursuing his goals, or simply satisfying his curiosity, Peter's murderous actions are presented within contexts that make them seem reasonable to viewers. This normalization of extreme violence has real-world implications for how audiences process and respond to actual violence in their daily lives. When fictional characters commit mass murder without consequences, it becomes easier to dismiss real violence as less serious than it actually is. The Peter Griffin phenomenon also reveals how comedy can be used to mask serious social problems. By presenting his violent tendencies as humorous character quirks rather than serious mental health issues, the show avoids confronting the deeper implications of his behavior. In conclusion, Peter Griffin's body count of 2,800 people makes him one of the deadliest characters in television history. His casual approach to mass murder, combined with the complete lack of consequences he faces, creates a character who embodies the worst aspects of unchecked violence and social irresponsibility. While Family Guy presents his actions as comedy, the sheer scale of death and destruction he causes reveals a character who belongs in prison rather than primetime television.